Everyone, and welcome back to the show. This is episode 99, which means next week is episode 100 and the big reveal of the rebranding of the podcast, plus a special offer for you guys. So I just want to remind you that since this is the last week before episode 100, it's also your last week and opportunity to enter into the raffle to win either a Starbucks gift card, a 45-minute coaching session with me, or a free guided meditation designed just for you on any topic you want me to do the meditation on. In order to win, you can either rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, or you can head over to the my bio in Instagram or in the show notes of this episode and click on the community survey link. I'm really trying to figure out where to take this show, what you guys are interested in, what pain points you're experiencing, what you want to hear about. And this survey will give me a lot of information on that. So far, I've gathered a lot of information, but I definitely want more. So if you rate and review the show, you're helping the show grow, because the more ratings and reviews a podcast has, the more likely it is to pop up when someone is searching for an episode or a podcast on a particular topic. And if we grow the show, that means these messages get to more people and hopefully impact more lives. And the community survey helps me to create content that is in alignment with what you guys are searching for. And the survey is not going to ask you about what kind of content you want me to create. The survey is going to ask you about what you're experiencing in your own life, things that are a struggle for you, how you like to consume content, what things are most impactful for you, things like that. It's an almost entirely click survey, so it should take you no more than 3 minutes to complete. If you do both of those things, you get entered to win into the raffle twice. So help the podcast grow, help yourself win one of the 3 prizes, help me get to know what you need better, and it's a win-win-win for everyone. Okay, now on to this week's episode. So in this week's episode, I am pulling back the curtain on the myth that spirituality and mindfulness means that we never, ever fall apart. I want to be really transparent about this, because I think in the self-help world, sometimes we get the message, maybe unintentionally, that if we just engage in the right practices, if we just have the right mindset, if we just get the right coach or right therapist, if we just do everything right, then we will never feel sadness, anger, frustration, overwhelm. We will live a life that is always joyful and always easeful and always happy. And that's just simply not true. The journey of life is a repeated pattern of moving away from your center and then coming back from your center. Now, all of those practices are hugely beneficial. They help you come back to your center more quickly and with more ease. They prevent you from going so far off your center a lot of the time. They're beautiful and wonderful. And of course, I live them every single day. I'm a huge believer. But the truth is, the real truth that we don't maybe talk about enough, and even enough on this show, is that sometimes life gets really heavy and overwhelming. And sometimes we fall apart, even though we're doing the practices, even though we believe in the philosophy and try to follow it, even though we have mental health professionals helping us or coaches helping us, whatever the case may be, whatever your practices are. Falling apart, at least temporarily, is just part of life's journey. And I think it's a part that we really need to embrace. And we don't. We tend to avoid it at all costs. If you're on my email list, which I hope you are, and if you're not, please use the link in the show notes to get on there. But if you are, and you read my email from earlier this week, I told you a story about my daughter, who, when she was in 3rd grade, she would repeatedly come home and talk about this poster that was on the wall of her classroom. And it was a quote by a woman named Cheryl Praheim, and it said, "It's okay to fall apart sometimes. Tacos fall apart and we still love them." And I love the quote. But I thought it was a little strange at the time that my 8-year-old child was coming home and referencing this quote so often, as if it had so much meaning for her in particular. And I didn't know at that time that my daughter was really already struggling with her mental health. We later found out that she has very severe OCD, anxiety, and depression. She went through a very challenging time over the course of several years. And she also has chronic pain, a chronic pain disorder. And I think that she was really struggling at that time. But on the outside, she was struggling on the inside, but on the outside, she seemed totally fine. She was happy. She had friends. She did well in school. Her teachers did nothing but rave about her. She was a competitive dancer. She had a smile on her face. She was loving. She was everything that you would want your young child to be and have on the outside. But on the inside, she was suffering and she just wasn't showing it or telling us. And I think that's why that quote resonated with her so much. She was almost trying to communicate with me that she was struggling, but at that age really just didn't have the words. And so that poster really spoke to her. Now, fast forward quite a few years, she is now 16, so 8 years later. Her mental health is doing so much better, but she still really struggles with a chronic pain condition. And it's something that we haven't really quite figured out yet. And it's something that we continue to work on, but it is one of the hardest things that I personally deal with in my life is watching my daughter have to navigate life with a chronic pain condition. It weighs heavy on my heart and on my mind all of the time. And we have really grown from the experience. I have grown, she has grown, we have grown as a family. There's so much we have learned. And I deeply believe that this experience will be impactful in the world, that she will use it in her life to impact the world. And I'm already doing that because it was out of her struggles and my experience as her mother navigating those struggles that this podcast was born. So out of these challenges, we can make deep and profound meaning. But that doesn't mean it's not still heavy. That doesn't mean that it doesn't still hurt. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't become overwhelming at times. And I recently had a moment where it became extremely overwhelming for me. I didn't realize that I needed a moment to fall apart. I was walking along in my life and knowing that the pain of watching her go through this was there, but feeling that I was managing it okay until I wasn't, until I wasn't. And it made me think about the idea, it gave me the idea for this podcast episode because I thought, why do we avoid falling apart? Why do we pretend like we're okay when we're not? Why do we shove our emotions down? You know, in the spiritual world, there's something called spiritual bypassing, which means that we take these really difficult things that are happening in our lives and we pretend like they're not bothering us because we are too spiritual for that, right? We're too unattached for that. We can separate ourselves from that experience. But that's really just, that's a fallacy. We are spiritual beings. We are on the path and on the journey. We're doing the best we can, but we're also human. We're just human, right? We're having this human experience. And the human experience can be really hard, even when you're doing all of the spiritual work. So awareness is key. I always say that. I've said that on this show more times than I can count. It is a deep belief of mine that all change begins with awareness, and that in awareness, through the light of awareness, is how we heal. That is is a salve, it is a medicine for healing. And so I wanted to bring some awareness to this. And in that awareness, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. So why do we avoid falling apart? Why do we pretend like we're okay even when we're not? Well, there's a lot of answers to that question. We feel very vulnerable. Okay, so falling apart feels very vulnerable. And that vulnerability can be interpreted by your body as danger, right? So our bodies might instinctively push away the sensation or the desire to really release and let go all of this burden that we're carrying, this negative energy, because in order to do that, we have to get really vulnerable for a period of time. And that often doesn't feel safe in our bodies. Now, when we think about that in a logical manner, when we get very left-brained about that, we can see that it's not unsafe, right? It's not unsafe to have a moment where you just break down. Maybe you cry, maybe you scream, maybe you contact a therapist to get help. Maybe you run to a partner or a friend and admit that you're just really having a hard time. There's actually really no danger to us in that situation, but our minds and our bodies tend to perceive it as danger. So the first thing I would say is become aware of that fact, that although we might be tricked into thinking or believing that it's dangerous to be vulnerable, it's actually really, really strong to be vulnerable, and that you can be safe in vulnerability as long as it's in the right circumstance and with the right people. The other thing that is a big reason that I think that we don't want to fall apart is loss of control, right? No one likes to feel like they are out of control. In fact, so much of what we do in our lives every day is in an effort to feel in control. And when we fall apart, we don't feel like we're in control. We're losing control of our emotions, of our thoughts, of our actions sometimes, and it can feel extremely unsettling. And again, this awareness that it's okay to lose control, right? Again, right setting, right people. This is all contingent that you're in a certain environment. But given the caveat that you're in a safe environment, then falling apart and losing control, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you are less than. It doesn't mean that you are incompetent, unvaluable, unlovable, right? These are the stories that we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves that I have to hold it together. People are depending on me. People might think that I can't do my job, or I'm not a good parent or partner, or whatever the storyline is in our minds, that we have to remain in control. We cannot fall apart, or we will be considered, incapable in our lives. But once again, the truth is, falling apart allows you to be strong. It allows you to be capable. It allows you to be who everyone in your life is depending on you to be, because you are releasing what no longer serves you. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. First, I just want to go through the reasons why we tend to avoid this falling apart, this sense of falling apart. Fear of the unknown is another big one. What's on the other side, right? If we've been white knuckling our way through a situation, and sometimes for years we white knuckle our way through, we grin, grit and bear, and we shove down emotions, and we put on a happy face, and we numb ourselves out, and we pretend like whatever this thing is we've got it under control, and it's not overwhelming us, and we're fine. I'm fine, you're fine, everything's fine, right? When in reality, it's truly not fine, but we are unwilling to say that. And probably because when we say that, the emotions start to rise up. When we finally admit that we're not okay, the floodgates of the emotions start coming through. And it's scary. It feels very unknown. We don't know. It feels like we may never pull ourselves back together, right? Again, if we think about that logically, like we can say, yes, we will pull ourselves together. We are strong women. We know how to move through difficult situations. But in the moment, falling apart feels like you might never get up off that floor. You may never stop crying. You may never stop yelling. You may never stop throwing things if that's what you need, right? And I understand that sensation. I totally get that, where it feels like the tears may start and they may never ever stop. But they will. And you will benefit so much from allowing yourself to release that. Societal expectations is another one. I think in the United States, we really value strength, stoicism, emotional control. These are things that are highly valued in our culture. And so to show anything less than that, again, brings us back to what will people think? That I am incompetent, unlovable, unvaluable, right? All these fears that we have of not being accepted in our society, whether that be family, work, community, wherever that may be, if I show this vulnerability and I start to fall apart. Sometimes we don't want to burden our loved ones, right? We don't want to be the one who who releases all this heavy stuff on someone else. Often as women, we like to be the receivers of that, right? We want to be the one the friend comes to or the child comes to. We want to be the one that, carries and holds the space for someone else's struggles and trials. And we feel uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable doing that in the opposite direction. But I promise you that being vulnerable, being real and honest and open, that is the way actually to build relationships. That is how you build deep, lasting connection with other people, is by showing them, again, as long as they are safe people, showing them who you really are and what's really going on inside of you, because they're human, just like you. And they're having struggles just like you. And when you can come together on that and really see each other and hold space for each other's difficult situations, it it builds a foundation, a really strong foundation for relationship. Another thing that I think about when I think about reasons why we don't want to fall apart is functionality. So we are women. We run the world. We do so much, right? So much at work, so much at home. And there's this pervading fear that if I fall apart, I won't be able to perform. I won't be able to do my job and be the parent and make sure the household runs okay and get the kids to their practices and walk the dog and all the things that we as women make sure that we take care of. And we don't want to do that, right? We care about other people. We want to serve them. We feel responsible in our roles, whether it be as a parent or as a partner, as in our jobs. And we think, I don't have time to fall apart. I legit don't have time to fall apart, right? Because if I fall apart, everybody else falls apart. And, a big reason that I became so passionate about the work that I do is because when my daughter started going through everything she went through, I thought, I cannot fall apart. I am steering this ship, and if I fall apart, the whole ship goes down, and there will be no one there to make sure that she's okay. So I have to hold it together. And that thinking was partially correct and partially incorrect. Did I need to prioritize myself and self-care in order to prevent me from going into the deep, dark hole that she was in? 100%, because I couldn't help anyone from that place, right? I needed to be clear-minded. I needed to be in touch with my intuition. I needed my nervous system to be regulated in order to navigate the healthcare system and of many, many different doctors and many different treatments and all the decisions that had to be made. The part that was wrong was that I thought that I could never fall apart. I always had to keep it together. But sometimes falling apart is just required. It's a required part of the process. It's not even optional. If you want to keep going, if you want to keep fighting the fight, right? Whether it be something really challenging like my daughter was going through, or just the fight of everyday life, right? The all the ups and downs of managing your life. Life gets overwhelming, even when there aren't really big things going on. So if we want to keep doing life and we want to keep doing life well, yes, we need to invest in ourselves. We need to prioritize our mental, physical, and emotional health. But we also need to sometimes just say, this is overwhelming and I need a moment, right? I need a moment to fall apart. So those are some of the reasons. I could go on, but I think those give you a really good idea about some of the reasons why we sometimes avoid falling apart. Now, let's talk about why it's really important actually to fall apart, right? Why it's, like I said, a necessary part of this journey. So what are some good reasons to fall apart, right? Now that we've reviewed all the reasons why we think we shouldn't fall apart. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to lose control. It feels unsafe. We don't want people to think we aren't strong, in control, that unvaluable, unlovable, things like that. So I get all that. And it's completely understandable. And it's why I have shoved down the urge to cry on many, many occasions and tried to move on with my life. But what I realized is that was actually counterproductive. It was counterproductive to me in every single way. When we carry around with us all of those negative emotions, because if we have negative emotions inside of us and we don't find a way to release them, they stay inside of us. And sometimes releasing them means going to a yoga class, having a great breathwork session, taking a walk in nature, having a dance party, spending some time with loved ones, right? There are many ways that we can release negative emotions. But when the emotions become so overwhelming that they feel like they're just brimming under the surface, right? They're just always there, and you can feel them right underneath the surface at all times. And they're threatening to overwhelm you at all times. And no amount of breath work or yoga classes or walks in nature are really going to release them in the way and in the quantity that they need to be released. That's when it's time for you to have a little bit of a breakdown, a little bit of falling apart. And I don't believe that that means that you are weak. I think it means that you are extremely resilient and strong, because you know that it's safe to break down. You know it's safe to release those emotions. And you know that you will return to yourself once you let all of that negative energy out. We have to release that. And when we do, we create actual space inside of us. So that energy, we are energy. Everything is energy. Your whole body is energy. Everything around you is energy. And when we are carrying around the emotions, the negative energy of these negative emotions, it takes up space inside our bodies, inside our minds, inside our souls. And we can actually feel it, right? Because that's why we call things heavy, right? When things are difficult in our lives, you might describe them as feeling heavy. That's because these types of emotions have a lower vibration and they actually are heavy. They are actually heavier. And when we feel really great, when we're excited about something, really passionate about something, think about the last time maybe you were on vacation or just anything great happened in your life, things were going, the way that you wanted them to go. We actually physically feel light. You might feel there's a little pep in your step or this openness in your chest, or you just have more energy, right? That's the energy of higher vibration emotions. And so if we continue to carry around the negativity of whatever is happening in our lives, if we don't release it, then we don't create space for that higher vibration energy to come in. We need to get rid of the old before we can fill up with the new. Think about cleaning out your closet, right? Your clothes, your clothing closet. Say you want to go shopping, it's spring is just starting, and you're thinking, I need to go refresh my spring wardrobe. Well, the best way to do that is to clear out your closet of all the things that you know you are no longer going to wear before you can bring in the new stuff that you're going to buy. Otherwise, you're trying to shove the new stuff into a closet that's already overstuffed and overfull, and it doesn't work. We need to create space. We need to get rid of what we no longer serves us to make room for what does. And having that kind of a release, like I said, whether it be crying or screaming or aggressive journaling. I've even done aggressive journaling. Whatever way in which your body feels that it needs to get it out, let it out. Holding on to those things not only prevents you from bringing in the fresh and new that you need, it can actually lead to illness, to sickness, right? We're harboring all of those negative emotions inside our bodies, and they can translate to actual physical illness, whether it be, back pain, headaches, upset stomachs, or something bigger than that. So it is in your best interest, both physically and mentally, to release what doesn't serve you, to fall apart, to know that you are resilient enough that you will come back from this. You will not stay in the falling apart, but you will release what needs to be released and create the space for what needs to come in. And when you do that, that's when the problem that didn't seem solvable all of a sudden seems manageable. It's when you couldn't figure out your next step, and then all of a sudden the next step appears and comes to you. It's when you thought this relationship was dead in the water, it was never going to work, and you saw some light at the end of the tunnel. Or maybe you didn't, but you were able to say with clarity that this relationship was done. Removing what doesn't serve us and letting in what does actually allows us to be the best versions of ourselves. The falling apart is what allows us to come back together, but come back together stronger and better. I don't know if you have ever heard of that Chinese pottery, and I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but I'll put it in the show notes. The concept is that we all break. And then when we put ourselves back together, we're stronger in the places that we broke. And this pottery that I'm talking about, that my middle-aged brain can't remember the name of, the pottery breaks and they glue it back together, but with a gold glue or something that is gold that brings it back together. And so it not only is stronger in the broken parts, but it's also more beautiful. And that's the same for us. Falling apart doesn't mean that you've lost your beauty. It means that you become more luminescent, more beautiful, stronger, and able to navigate the challenges of life better. The other reason I really think that falling apart is a good idea, dare I say, is that it's an opportunity for profound personal growth. It is the catalyst. When we're forced to confront our vulnerabilities, our limitations, we have the opportunity to rebuild ourselves, and we can rebuild in a more authentic and resilient way. I think that it's also where, as I mentioned, we have the opportunity to create really deep and meaningful relationships, because that vulnerability allows us to let people in. We let people in when we're vulnerable. And yes, that can sound scary. And yes, it needs to be done with the right people. But done with the right people, it is a beautiful opportunity to have the type of connection in your life that I know you're searching for. We're all searching for it. But when we keep people at arm's length by saying we're okay when we're not, we don't give them the opportunity to show up for us. We don't give them the opportunity to hold us in our pain and to be the vision for us when we can't hold it for ourselves. When we're constantly trying to hold the world up all by ourselves on our own shoulders, we can't get close to anyone else. We're literally blocking people out, right? When you think about holding the world up, you're literally and metaphorically blocking people from getting close to you. And when you drop it all, when you release it all, and you just show people who you are and what you need, they can come in, they can get close, and they can help you navigate this very challenging situation. In yoga philosophy, it doesn't really talk about falling apart per se. But I always come back to yoga. That's my favorite quote. It all comes back to yoga. It's on my Instagram profile because I find myself saying that all the time when I'm in a certain situation in my life, and I kind of come to an understanding, and then I realize that yoga has been teaching about that. So it's why I love yoga so much. And I wanted to see what yoga said about falling apart. And I did a little research because I hadn't really heard anything in my studies as thus far. And I didn't find anything that was specific to that. But what I did find were a correlation with the yamas and the niyamas. And, it's been a while since I've done an episode on the yamas and niyamas. I need to bring those back. I will link some of those in the show notes as well, some of the ones that I've done, but I will plan to do more. But what I found is that one of the big teachings of yoga, which I have actually done an episode on this, is aparigraha, which stands for non-attachment. And yoga teaches us to detach from our outcomes, like from the outcomes of anything, right? So when you're, let's say, doing a big project at work, and maybe you are really worried about how well that project will be perceived, or how many clients. Let's say you work for an organization, your role is to get clients. So you're putting this proposal together and you are trying to get clients, and you're working really hard on it, and you're super stressed that you're not going to get any clients from this work that you're doing. Yoga would say you need to be non-attached. You need to do what is needed of you in the moment, right? So do the best you can, work hard, put your thought, your energy, your heart into this project without thinking about the outcome, without worrying about how it was going to be received, if it was going to be effective, if it's going to be what your boss desired. You just do the best you can and let life unfold in the way that it unfolds. And non-attachment also is related to your external circumstances. So when it comes to falling apart, why are we falling apart? Why was I falling apart a few weeks ago? I was falling apart because my external circumstances, my daughter's health, is not what I desire, right? I, of course, as her mom, want her to be healthy and vibrant and be able to do everything that she wants to do in life without limitation. I want her to know a world where she's not in pain, where she has tons of energy, where she feels like life is what it should be as a 16-year-old, healthy 16-year-old. But she's not a healthy 16-year-old. Unfortunately, right now, she is a sick 16-year-old. And I am having trouble being unattached to that circumstance. I want to change it. I want it to be different, right? So my suffering, all suffering, comes from our inability to accept the present moment exactly as it is. It comes in our resistance to the present moment. And I found myself a week or two ago in very deep resistance to the present moment as it was. And so I became overwhelmed by doubts and fears and questions and emotions. And I had a breakdown. But here's the thing. I let myself have it. I didn't push it away this time. There have been times in my past where I have. I didn't push it away this time. I let it fully come on. I'm talking like sobbing to the point where I couldn't hold myself up. I found myself on the kitchen floor, sobbing uncontrollably for a very long period of time. I couldn't stop it. It just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming until I reached a point of sheer exhaustion and went to bed. The next day, when I woke up, I could feel that that energy had left my body. I felt so open and lighter. And I felt almost in a fog. There was almost nothing going on in my head, which is very unusual for me. Things felt slow, but it was the transmuting of energy. That's what I was experiencing. I had allowed myself to release what was not serving me. So there was a vacuum now of where that dense energy once was that was filling. It was filling with better emotions, better thoughts, better feelings. And within 24 hours, I felt so much better. And I had been shoving that breakdown down for a long time. But in fully allowing it to be and not resisting what my body needed, I have been able to come back to this aparigraha, this non-attachment to my external circumstances. I have been able to recalibrate. And that's what having a breakdown allows you to do. It allows you to recalibrate and realign. It allows you to come back to the present moment and not resisting it as it is. It allows you to transform your current situation just by thinking about it differently, seeing it differently, seeing the opportunities, seeing the good. It really is an essential part of this journey of life, of spiritual growth, of getting to know yourself. And the one other yoga philosophy that I found that really related to this concept is the concept of impermanence. And that's talked a lot about in Buddhism as well, impermanence. And it's the idea that everything changes, things fall apart, and then they are rebuilt. And that is the natural cycle of life. The natural cycle of life is that we fall apart and we rebuild ourselves. And we rebuild ourselves better. We put our pieces back together with gold, and we become stronger in the broken parts and more beautiful. I hope that that was helpful to you. I hope it gave you the permission to fall apart when you need to, and to know that there's nothing wrong with you for falling apart. And that not only should you fall apart, but it's actually required if you want to move to the next level of evolution in your life. It's an opportunity to transform. It's an opportunity to build beautiful, deep relationships. It's an opportunity to clear out what's no longer serving you and bring in what is. As always, my friends, I love to hear from you. I love to hear what you think about these topics. Please send me a DM on Instagram, or you can email me. I have all the links in the show notes. If you're listening on Spotify, you can comment directly on Spotify on the show. If you're not on my newsletter, get on there. There's so much great content. If you want to read that particular, if you're not on my newsletter, but you want to read the blog post that I wrote this week about this topic, you can head over to my website, katiefarinas.com. It's under the blog section. And have a wonderful, wonderful week. If you're thinking about how to integrate this into your life, awareness, awareness, awareness. Remember, that's the medicine that's the medicine that serves us, the salve, I like to call it. So think about yourself. Do you pretend that you're okay when you're not okay? Do you have emotions that are just brimming under the surface, waiting to boil over? And if they do they boil over in anger? And is that a protective mechanism, right? I'm not falling apart if I'm angry, right? Angry doesn't seem like falling apart. So do you protect yourself from falling apart by seeming angry? Do you have biases about what it means to fall apart for yourself or anyone else? Just start to think about this. Just bring awareness to it. That's my invitation for you this week, is to just bring awareness to this topic for yourself and see what you think, the ideas that you're carrying around in your mind, and see if you want to tweak those ideas in any way after listening to this talk. Okay, have a great week. I love you all so much. Mwah, mwah, mwah. I cannot wait for next week to release the new podcast title and the new focus of the show, and the new offering that I have that I'm really excited about. Okay, bye-bye.